You also wrote a sex scene that spanned a few pages. You didn't just,
Yes.
hint at it. I mean, you went right into it, and you gave details, you stuck with it. And in recent years, it seems like sex, which used to be a staple in the horror genre, has been used less and less.
Mhm.
Did you have any trepidation with including that scene?
Um, yes. Yeah, I was nervous. I've written sex scenes before, but not in anything that I have shared publicly. And it is, I used to write YA, so going from young adult to adult, where it's like, no fade to black. We're just going into it. I was a little worried of how it would be perceived, because as the author, you have one vision for the work and you have one intention, but you can't really control how it is received. So I was very nervous about that. I was nervous. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right in terms of representation. Luckily, I am a queer woman, so I didn't have to. I didn't have to, go out and poll people or anything like that. But I just wanted to make sure that it fit the story. It was respectful, and it had the right tone, I suppose.
Mm. I think you captured it. I can only give my perspective, but as a straight cisgender male, I didn't feel that it was trashy.
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier that there's plenty of lustful desire in this book, but that scene in particular, even though it was steamy, it was hot and heavy, it overall, to me, it came off as sweet, it came off as tender, and there was more love at the core of it. And
Hmm.
I think that for the arc of Callie's character, it
Hmm.
came at the perfect time, and it set some things in motion that were going to be very important as the story moved forward.
Right. Thank you.
So yeah, props to you for putting it out there and not shying away. I've mentioned in our horror group that we have going on Instagram that I put a sex scene into my upcoming novella, The Potted Plant, but I got nervous and I shied away. As you said, I sort of faded to black with it.
Yeah.
But you've given me a lot to think about moving forward, because I think that sex scenes, when they are done right in a horror novel, they can really up the stakes.
Hmm.
And I think that that's important, because like we touched on it a little bit, talking about torture porn. And if
Yes.
it's just torture for the sake of torture, it doesn't mean as much. But when you get to
Hmm.
know those characters, when you understand their motives, when you realize all of the emotions that are
Hmm.
tied up in it all, it can make that torture much more important. It's not just a gore grab. it's
Yes.
it's something that you as the reader can feel. And so if it's right for the story, I think that sex scenes can do that. And I wonder why, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, why it seems that in recent years that people have shied away from it. Because when we look at our culture as a whole, and we look at movies and we look at TV shows, um, they haven't really shied away from sex. It seems like many have even embraced it more.
Hmm.
Why do you
Hmm.
think the horror literature has shied away from it?
I think, sex in horror, especially horror literature, has always kind of been fraught. There's a lot of assault, unfortunately. There's a lot of just weird sex scenes, just weird in general. Um, I think of, there's the scene in It that's like, it's not really, does not have to be in there. And I've definitely read books that I've like had to put down before, because I was like, okay, there's assault here and there doesn't need to be. It's just for the shock value,
Mhm.
essentially. And I don't like that. And I think people have started to realize that that's not okay. And instead of just like scaling back because they're afraid, I think they just completely avoid it. Um, so I think it's, people need to sort of realize that it is okay to include sex. You can include sex without tying it to violence. Um, I mean, if it's properly motivated, I think it's fine to be in a story because people have sex, people are sexual. And, with horror, it really helps, like you said, up the emotional stakes. So I would like to see more of it. But right now, I think it's just people are kind of afraid to include it. And I mean, as a writer, it is very scary to include that because obviously, like, I don't write romance, so I'm not used to writing public sex scenes. So I think there's, that aspect too.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And it's a bit of a dichotomy because on one hand, it's good that people are realizing that, just throwing sexual abuse into a story for shock value, it probably isn't the best route to go. But
Hmm.
it's also sad that for many people it seems that like we struggle to separate abuse from love and
Hmm.
tenderness and sex. But I mean, even lustful desire, it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be violent.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's interesting. There are pros and cons here, but overall, it would be nice to see people easing back into that without using it for shock value. But if your character is falling in love, or if your character is feeling those strong emotions,
Hmm.
don't run from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is very scary. It feels like being caught with your pants down or being
Yeah.
naked in public. But I'm
Mhm.
also glad that it's in there because I feel like it serves a story. And, Stephen King is always a big believer of not holding back. So I'm trying to embrace that a little more and be braver in my work.